And good evening, everyone. How are you doing today? My name is C. Alexandria Bernard Thomas, and I am the host of tonight's panel discussion. Tonight's panel discussion is writing to well. And good evening, everyone. How are you doing today? My name is technical difficulties. My apologies. We're trying to get there. Again, my name is C. Alexandria Bernard Thomas. I am the host for tonight's panel discussion. Tonight's panel discussion is Writing to Wellness, and I am here with the three facilitators of Writing to Wellness from my Writing to Wellness. We have Ms. Kim B. Miller, who is the facilitator for Writing to Wellness for Women. We have Enoch the Poet, who is the facilitator for Writing to Wellness for Men. And last but never least, we have Jamal Rashad, who is the facilitator for Writing to Wellness for the LGBTQIA community. These workshops were all created from little old me. I was bored one day, so I wanted to give something back to the community to help us navigate trauma. And one way of navigating trauma is through poetry. And I said, why not? Let's do this. This workshop is birthed from childhood trauma. This workshop, forgive me, is also a way of communicating with others who have experienced certain levels of trauma. And then we talk about certain things, all topic discussions, and then we write about it. We read poetry, and then we talk about the poem, and then we write more poetry because it is a writer's workshop after all. Nonetheless, tonight's panel discussion is going to be a little bit different. It's what we are going to talk about a tactic that has plagued the United States and actually is global for forever. And tonight we're going to talk about normalization. I do want to go ahead and issue a trigger warning right now for anyone who is listening. This is a sensitive conversation. Your well-being is my absolute main priority. If you at any time feel this conversation is too much, please, by all means, take care of yourself. If that means logging off, do that and gather yourself. Your well-being is my priority. So going into this, I just also want to point out that the four of us, we are not therapists. We are not licensed therapists. We are just artists who have experience in talking about trauma and to give advice and to navigate and to help and give aid. Also, with that being said, during the end of the discussion, I will be providing you with my email if any of you want resources to help you along that way as well. So the topic is normalization. What is normalization? That's a good question. Normalization is a tactic that is used to desensitize a person's ability to be rational with their own consent and boundaries because the aggressor is pushing an issue for them to agree to inappropriate behavior that is coercive, abusive, and very much so negative. The aggressors would do anything in their power to make that victim feel less sensitive and more open to the behavior that they're trying to push upon them. And they would say things, and they'll do things like downplay their reactions, or they will go ahead and or they'll mock their reactions with negativity. And once this done, the victim will begin to look at this situation as, well, it can't be so bad. And so they'll start to let down their guard. And once that is done, they start looking at that behavior as being healthy and normal, when in reality, it is not. And with normalization, an example of that is grooming and pedophilia. And what they do is they'll say something like, it's not wrong if we love each other. And they'll keep pressing that issue. And then once they actually get through to that child, then they go in for what they actually came to do. And that's to prey on that vulnerable child and their vulnerability. Now I'm going to share a story, and then we'll start our conversation. There was a young lady who disclosed to me, and I do have permission to share this story. She disclosed to me, and she told me that when she was 5 years old, her father touched her. And when she told her grandmother bathed her, dressed her up, and took her out for ice cream. And later told her that he only touches you because he loves you. And this went on for a long period of time. And until age 13, when her father passed away. When her father passed away, she felt relieved. And, a lot of trauma, of course, but as time went on and when she became an adult, she went through, a lot of trauma responses, drug and alcohol use, and a lot of separation from herself, a lot of disassociation, a lot of that. And she eventually got the help that she needed. And today, I am proud to say she is a psychotherapist helping children. And she also later found out that her grandmother was molested as a child, and her mother told her the same exact thing. There are two things that are wrong with this. One, CSA is not an act of love, nor is it an act of protection. It is exactly sexual assault against the child. And two, intergenerational trauma is a real thing. It is passed down. And it's a stigma that has been plaguing us forever. So the question I'm going to pose to our panel to get this conversation going is, how do you feel, one, about hearing this? And then two, what can we do to start preventing things like this from happening within our own community and our own backyard? And I also want to offer that 90% of abused children are very much so familiar with their perpetrator, and 70% of those who are abused by someone within the family. Ms. Kim?
Well, see, Thomas, this is a touchy subject, but, we have to talk about it honestly. And I say that to say, the question is, well, how do I feel about it? I really can't put into words. And as a poet, us not being able to put something into words is a big deal. The hurt, the anger, the absolute undescribable feeling that I have to know that any child is being put in a position he, she, non-binary does not want to be in, is a feeling as a mother I can't even begin to mouth and put verbs to it that another human being would be able to understand it. It's just infuriating, mad. None of that covers it. It just doesn't cover it. There's no words existing on the planet that covers that. And you say, well, Kim, if it didn't happen to your child, if that's your thought, singularly on your own child, then you're part of the problem. I'm gonna say that again. If you're only concerned with your own children, you are part of the problem. And that's where the problem lays. Well, that's someone else's family. Don't be so quick. Do you know all your family history? Because some of us are playing hide and seek with pain, but pain always wins. So I say this, first of all, even if it isn't in your family, you absolutely happen to be correct this one time, doesn't mean it doesn't affect your family. Your child, your sons, your daughter, your non-binary child, friend has been affected. That affects your child. Children are naturally loving, and they're naturally, I call them the feely people of the planet. So they feel, they know, they get in touch with themselves, they get in touch with other people's feelings, they care. So if their friend is experiencing, guess what? They're experiencing it. And how do you stop it? By one, stopping the lie. It's not in my family, or I don't want my cousin, father, grandfather, mother, sister, brother to go to jail. Really? Well, where do you want them to go? And I don't mean that funny. I mean that for real. Where do you want them to go? Because they got to go someplace. You're making it normal. So don't get all outraged when a stranger does it. If when it was your uncle, cousin's grandmother, you was okay with it. Oh, I wasn't okay with it, but I just didn't want them to go to jail. Then you don't want anybody in jail. You see, there's no fences in death. There's no fences in pain. You got to pick a side. And we have conveniently been telling ourselves, well, if I ignore it, it'll go away. Do you ignore fire? Do you ignore when your car has a flat? Everything that means something to you, you do something about. So what we're going to do is change the mindset of, well, I thought, now you know. Because you knew then, but let's say you didn't know. Now you know. You have to do something. but I don't want them to go to jail. Do you want more children to be victims? Ask yourself that. Do you want more children to be victims? The first one didn't deserve it. Two definitely don't. So you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. There's no fences in pain. So we're going to talk ourselves out of that. Well, I really didn't want to get involved. You were involved as soon as you knew. And let's stop with the, well, I didn't know. If you didn't know because you pretended you didn't know, you still knew. See, we good in synonyms. We like the flavor of that, but we're going to get to the flavor of truth today. You are part of the problem if you knew about it and you did nothing. You are part of the problem if you're like, well, I think I know, but I don't know exactly. So you can't accuse people. Some of you do more detective work on Facebook than you do on your own children. Get to work just like you would if someone stole your money. Some of you missing $1, you accusing everybody. Where's my money? Where's my money? These your kids. Get to work. Let me because I'll be here all day. Somebody else need to talk, so I'm myself.
I thank you for that, and you are absolutely right. Blake Lively once said, "What is the value of your child's life? If your child's life is priceless, then what are the value of those other children who are not your children? It should be the same value." And a lot of times we find ourselves reading stories where the abuser was protected more so. The abuser was more so protected than the victim. And that's sad because it should be the opposite. The victim did nothing to ask for what happened to them. That's an innocent child. And as adults, we need to be that safe adult to protect not just our children, but all children. And like you said, it may not affect your family, but trust and believe, you may know someone who was sexually assaulted. You may know someone who is being sexually assaulted. And like you said, doing nothing, you're just as part of the problem as the abuser. You've just made yourself an accomplice because you now know about it and you've done nothing. You're covering up for them. That you're helping to keep up the facade that everything is okay. And that is so not the case. We have to step up as adults, and we have to step up our preventative measures as adults. And I understand it's a very scary thing, but we have to be willing to take a risk to protect all children. If you have suspicion, act on it. In Maryland, DC, and Virginia, you do not have to have a shred of evidence to prove that a child is being abused. You just have to have your suspicion. Thank you, Ms. Kim, for that. Enoch.
How do I feel? And what was the second question?
What can we do to help prevent this from happening in our communities?
Word. My throat is going out. Feelings similar to Kim. I don't really have many words for the act itself because it is horrendous. And at the same time, the fact that this person was able to channel that experience into something that can save other people, I think is empowering. So I guess the two words I do have are horrendous and empowering. Because duality, there are two sides to everything. And I think that's super important and super powerful that she was able to not allow this thing to dictate the trajectory of her life, which is a really hard thing to do because it is a scarring event or sequence of events that have like lasting ripple effects, right? From the individual to the offspring of the individual to the people connected to the individual. It can be a very widespread thing. And the fact that she was able to get a grasp on that, I think is very commendable. In terms of what can we do, there's so much to be done. Where do we even start, right? I think transparency and honesty is very crucial, specifically for the people who are around the victim and the abuser, right? Because oftentimes, rarely, I think there is ever a situation where this thing is happening without somebody's knowledge, right? Whether you were told directly or you noticed behaviors and had questions, but then there's this projection that occurs depending on proximity, where we feel like if this is true about somebody we love, then like, what does that say about us, right? We see this with parents all the time, where it's like, if my child is doing this, or if my cousin is doing this, or if my brother or sister is doing this, then what does that say about how I raised them? What does that say about my ability as a sibling? And we take all these things and internalize them and don't do anything for the person who's actually being harmed, right? And so I think this need to remove ourselves mentally from the situation so we can actually do something physically in the tangible world about the situation is very, very important. And I actually was just having a conversation with one of my homies about this the other day. And I won't, disclose why we were having this conversation, but we also talked about the importance of paying attention to the person who was abused. Because I also think on one end of the spectrum, there is a denial and a normalization and a lack of accountability for the abuser. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's such a fervor for the abuser that the person who was abused gets erased. And then we spend all this time talking about what was or wasn't, or what we should do and shouldn't do, while there's this person who's been harmed that isn't getting treatment and isn't getting care, right? So I think, for me at least, two of the biggest things are removing that projection and doing something about the situation, regardless of what you think is happening or isn't happening. And if you are comfortable leaning into the fact that somebody is abusive, don't lose sight of the fact that there was somebody that was abused. So yeah, that's my piece.
And I thank you so much for that. It's interesting that you even said removing ourselves, because when part of knowing how to respond to child sexual assault and to help, to normalize the conversation around abuse, to actually have those conversations, you should always not put yourself into the situation, because at this moment, you don't matter. What matters is that person who was harmed, who was victimized. They are the main priority at that given time. And I'm not saying that your feelings don't matter, but we have to really keep that into ourselves. And I know it can be hard, especially if it's a child or even a grown person who told you that, it happened to them, and this is a loved one of yours. And I know it can be very difficult, but we have to keep our personal feelings to ourselves at all times. And one other thing I want to point out, when they do tell you, or when you find this out, and I've heard a lot of stories with this, a lot of people say, well, I told them, that the person who abused them, they're stupid, they suck, they're dumb, blah, blah, blah. And you shouldn't do that. And the reason why you should not do that is because the person who is victimized, they're very protective over people who they love. And that could be the abuser, because they have this connection with that person. And if you talk about them in that negative way, they may not want to open up to you no more. So we have to remain calm. We have to listen, and we have to do everything within our power to help them to get to where they need in their healing process, or the beginning stages of their healing process. It is very important to remain steadfast in that. Also, I like the fact how you said to, lean into getting this person help, because yes, a lot of survivors don't want to talk, or have been taught, I should say, to remain silent. They've been force-fed, what goes on in this family stays in this family. It's no one's business, and that's it. And it just continues and continues. So they've been force-fed that, or they're called sensitive when they talk about it, and they're told to get over it. And then when you keep calling them sensitive, they start to really believe it, and they start to internalize a lot of things, and then they start to form in self-esteem issues, and that helps reinforce the stay in silence, or they think, well, maybe I made it up. And where in the case, no, you did not. you were sexually assaulted. And we need to recognize and acknowledge that. It is tough and as hard as it is, that's the reality. They're not sensitive. They were assaulted. They're hurting. They are in pain. They are longing. And that's the trauma response that was then taught with the drug use and alcoholism, and then maybe even, sexual activity, or worse, suicide, God forbid. We need to actually be okay, or learn how to be okay, and then learn how to respond and react so we can actually help the situation smooth out. 95% of abuse is preventable through education and training. Thank you for your answer. Jamal?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, right? So my initial response is sadness, right? I think that what comes to mind like immediately is just like a culture of silence, right? We have this culture of silence, especially when we're talking about like family stuff, or cycles of abuse in families. We have this culture of silence, where people, I think, and I want to think out of a very profound place of not knowing what to do, um, opt for silence, or denial, right, or all of these other like these unhealthy um, ways to cope with abuse that is going on. Um, I also think that it is important to be compassionate when we are confronting like these cycles of abuse with ourselves, because I do think that for a lot of people, even for myself, um, there was a period where I was doing like family research, and I uncovered, um, a part of family history that was not very pleasant. There was an abuser, right, that people knew about, and that was just something that was right. I didn't know until I was an adult. Um, and I think that for myself, my first question was, wow, so what do we do with this, right? So where do we go from here? And I think for a lot of people, there's this very profound place of not knowing what to do or where to go, right? Or how to approach this. Um, and especially if you exist in a family where um certain things are distasteful, right? So like rocking the boat or becoming like that pariah in the family or things like that, right? It can be very difficult because you don't want to isolate yourself from what you view as a core like support system. So I do think that we do have to move in a place of like compassion and gentleness with ourselves when we are confronting these things. Um, because we won't always do things right, and we won't always do things and we won't always know what to do. Something else that came up for me when you were speaking was prioritizing, right? Whose voices are we prioritizing in these conversations? Who is being given the privilege of a voice or agency? And I always think about how for a lot of folks and for a lot of families, children are not given true agency, right? We don't really listen to uh, what a child is thinking, how a child is feeling, and if we do, we don't take that into, you know what I mean. We don't what's the word? We don't integrate that right into our practice, right? It's just like a spot check. Okay, you good? Nobody touched you. You hungry? This and that, right? But we don't view them as adults with agency. And I think that that is something that is very important to me, that we get to a place where we are viewing them that as adult, as little people with agency, and that we are giving them the tools to exercise that agency, right? And we talked about this before, right? As a child, I used to have this aunt that always ran up on me and she would bite me on the cheek, and I thought that was the most uncomfortable, like disrespectful thing ever. It is really small, but it's not, right? Because I didn't know that I could say, I don't want you to do that, right? As simple as that, right? Giving children permission to say, I do not want you to do that. I do not like when you touch me. I would not, I would prefer not to engage right now, right? We don't give children those options. And I think that it is important that we start to prioritize just as much the wants, needs, and thoughts of children in these situations as much as we do anyone else. Um And yeah, there's another part of me that has a thought about this whole notion of what goes on in this house stays in this house, and how that needs to be done away with, right? I think that one of the most profound things and one of the most important things that my mother did for me when I was a kid is when something happened, it was not abuse, but something like really traumatic happened. She said, "Okay, we're going to a therapist, right? Because I don't know what to do." You know what I mean? I don't know what to do, and you don't know what to do. So we're gonna go to someone who can kind of help us sort this mess out, right? We're going to a therapist. So I thought that was beautiful. Look, in hindsight, I think that was very beautiful. And it's not like we have to just like, throw all our baggage into the streets, but we need to go to someone who can help us with this stuff, right? So that it doesn't snowball, right? And we don't become um just trapped in a cycle of trauma.
Thank you for, I don't know. Yeah, okay. I didn't know if you were finished. My apologies. The thing that sticks out to me the most with what you said is giving children agency. Everything you said was important, but that right there stood out to me the most because consent and boundaries should be taught, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as that child is conceived. You see a lot of women when they're pregnant, a lot of people want to touch her stomach. That's too intrusive. I feel it's too intrusive. Like, don't touch me, no, hands off. And that right there, how I feel, that's a way of them feeling, testing the mother's boundaries, see how far she's gonna be willing to let them go. And so when the child is born, so then go feel as though that they have every right to hold this child because you let me touch your stomach when you were pregnant, so I can hold this child. And that's not the case. It should start right there as soon as that child is conceived. Don't touch my stomach. And then let's be clear, some women have difficult pregnancies and don't want to be touched, and rough, and the child to push your organs all up in the woman's throat anyway, don't leave her alone. So when that child is born, it's the parent's job, not just the mother, but it's the parent's job to enforce healthy boundaries. Those healthy boundaries will then lead to consent, to the laws of consent. I like to call the laws of consent. This child will let you know if they want you to hug them, if they want to be held, even if they want to say hi. This child should be allowed to say no to something that they don't feel comfortable with doing if they should want to. I come from the era where, if an adult says something, you cannot tell them no because it was absolutely disrespect. And that is a setup. It was a setup. You teach your children healthy boundaries and consent at a very early age. You're not teaching them to be disrespectful. You're teaching them to advocate for themselves further into the future. You have these conversations with them, child. And another thing, don't call the penis a wee-wee and don't call the vagina a cookie. Call them by their actual names. Vagina, penis, breast, buttocks. They're not bad words. They're the actual names of the body part. And because this also helps when a child discloses. There was a story that I conducted training, and within this training is a video that plays. And a social worker said a child disclosed to her teacher and said that her daddy ate her cookie last night. And the teachers just thought, it was a regular cookie, but she was talking about an oral sex act and the teacher didn't know. So this is why that's also important to let them know the names of the body parts. This is also, it's good to also to let the child be able to tell you, no, I don't want you to bathe me. Teach the child to bathe themselves. And, at an early stage, be there, yes, to aid them, but if they don't want you to touch them while they're bathing, don't do it. Let that child have that much freedom and that agency over their body, number one, and then let them have the freedom and the actual decency to advocate for or to learn the process of advocating for themselves at an early age. Thank you so much for that. I'm about to call you Jonathan for Jamal. Thank you so much. So with normalizing, we have the tactic, like I said, it's manipulation of another human being's boundaries and consent, right? So a couple of the things that when normalizing takes place and happens, some of the language, the wording. right? You'll hear things like I said earlier, it was not bad because if we love each other, right? Then we also hear, just relax. If you don't like it, we don't have to do it again. My personal favorite, and I know this is probably going to upset a few people, but my personal favorite, this was God's plan for you. Miss Kim, what are your feelings on this?
You done hit the button now. You done hit the button. People, stop associating your stuff with God. First of all, this is a button of mine. Because people are consistently using God and God's word, irrelevant if you're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, doesn't matter who it is. Any word can be switched to make it what you want it to mean. And that's what people are doing. So you say to yourself, well, they said, God said, think about God and what God represents, love. Does this sound like something God came up with? Really? So I say that to say, number one, stop doing it. But I know you people who are manipulators ain't gonna stop. So I know I'm just speaking to the choir right now. That's fine. The more singers we have, the louder the choir gets. Anyway, I'm trying not to get poetic. So the point is, when you start, as Chris was talking about, because just like, okay, I know some of you parents out there like, he tripping. No kid in my house gonna be telling me what he or she ain't going, they are non-binary ain't gonna be doing. I make the rules up in here. Okay, got that. I understand where you're going. Your first thought is to the rules and structure and discipline of your house, and you don't want your kid running your house, you want you running your house. Got that. That wasn't his point. And I'm bringing that up because I know some of you heard it that way. What he was saying was, when you tell your child, you have the ability when so-and-so, when anybody walks through this door, you have the ability to say, hi, smile, hug. Anything that you decide to do is therefore up to you based on how you feel or how you're feeling. That's not disrespecting your rules. That's telling them that they have rules about themselves that they can enforce, and you are the first guardian of that rule. You make that rule solidify and bigger now. So now the next time someone comes up to them, they go, wait. Mom and dad said, if I don't feel comfortable, I don't have to do anything. So I don't feel comfortable right now. So I'm not going to do anything. Plus, parents, let's think about this for a minute. I really need y'all to be listening. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever you consider yourself. I'm not talking about ones who birthed. I'm not, let's not get into technicalities because some of y'all are good on the synonyms. I said that before. We ain't talking about that. Once you start that, you should look at patterns. Hear me now. If when Susie comes over, your kid knocks you down to hug Susie. Jonathan comes over, your kid knocks you down to give Jonathan a high five. Karen comes over, I don't want to come out my room. Start looking at patterns. Maybe that day they don't want to talk to Karen. But if 20 times they don't want to talk to Karen, maybe there's an issue with Karen, not your kid. Start looking at behaviors. Well, heck, how come every time Karen come over, they don't even want to come out their room? That's strange. It's not strange. They're telling you something. They're telling you they feel something. And even if you don't see it, there's something there. Doesn't mean something happened. I'm not trying to put something there, but I'm telling you that kids have an internal feeling too. They have that internal dialogue with themselves too. And they get it when something's not right. Doesn't mean the person's been abusive to them. Doesn't mean the person is sexually, but there's something there about the person they don't like. Let that be their boundary. Let that be enough. And then start checking the patterns. If you got 5 kids and all of them say, oh, Karen, let me go back to my room. Karen's a problem. Now stop talking about that's your BFF and she's been your friend for 20 years. Guess what? Karen is a problem. Pets and kids, I tell you, they are the barometers of what's wrong with people. They are so good at that. And I'm not saying for you to, distance yourself from Karen. She hasn't actually done, I'm not saying that. I'm saying look for the patterns of your life. Look at the boundaries you put up for your kids. Be their first cheerleader on the boundary. Well, Uncle so-and-so is coming over and he hugs too long. I don't like it. Really? I didn't notice that. Huh. Okay, well, go ahead to your room. Hey, where's my little niece? She's in her room. She doesn't feel well. Well, let me go up there. No, she doesn't feel well. If you take one step on that step, this conversation is going to change. Your boundary has to be direct and enforceable, not, well, I don't want to hurt Uncle so-and-so's feeling. So you're going to hurt your child's feeling? Set boundaries. Let them know that you are absolutely be the cheerleader and enforcer of that boundary. And it does not take you away from being the head of your household, the person who runs your house, the person who sets the rules in your house. What you're doing is setting healthy guidelines, and you'll start to notice a pattern. Look for the patterns. Your kids and your pets, I'm gonna believe in pets too, that's another subject, will tell you patterns that you are missing. Look out for them and help them be the enforcer. Don't, oh, kiss so-and-so in the mouth. Okay, no. First of all, kiss so-and-so on the cheek if you feel like it. No, not feeling it? Okay, see ya. Because if you want them to know that there's boundaries and there's limits to all things, you be the one to show them that there are limits to all things. You're the one pushing them outside of their comfort zone. I don't want to hug. Oh, go on over there and hug you. Go over there and hug your friend. Go over. Stop that. Your personal boundary is what you feel like you are comfortable doing. And then please look for the patterns.
And thank you so very much. And I want to reframe a few things. As you said, not that you said it wrong. I just don't want anyone to take the information wrong. When she mentioned Karen, that was funny. But when she mentioned Karen and how Karen may be the problem, and you see your child not wanting to talk to Karen, just to take this a little step further, you should have a conversation with your child. And this is a conversation me and another one of my advocate friends have. If you have, and I'm glad you even brought that up, because if you see your child interacting with all these other people, but then there's one person 25 times, they don't want to be around at all of a sudden, don't want to be around them at all, you might want to have a conversation. And the conversation, the two most noticeable signs of abuse are not physical, believe it or not, it's emotional and behavioral problems. When you see your child start to resort and do stuff, like Karen, for instance, they were best friends, but now all of a sudden they're not, and she don't like to be around Karen, and Karen makes her sad when she's around. The conversation should be, hey Julia, I see, you and Karen normally be playing, but I see that you don't want to be around her no more. What's going on? That's you checking in on the child. And you are actually right there telling the child that you've noticed the behavior, you notice it's a pattern with this behavior, and you are actually showing her that you care about them, right? This will open up conversation. If this does open a conversation, it may be anything. It doesn't have to be nothing, assault or nothing related, but it opens up the conversation. And it may be, well, Karen says she don't want to be my friend no more, so whatever. And that's great. You now know, and you know how to talk to her in that direction, right? And then, if your child's upstairs, like you were saying with the uncle, when we go check, she don't feel good. No, she doesn't feel good. Right now is not a good time. She might want to see you before you leave. Let's go in the living room and have our conversation. Let's go sit down in the living room and have our tea. That's called bystander intervention. You're protecting the child, and it should be calm and direct. So I want to put that out there, reframe everything that Mama Kim said. She didn't say anything wrong. I just didn't want you all to take the information and run amok and think you all can go out here and knuckle up. Don't do that. Don't do that. But yes, thank you so very much for that. Enoch.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. There's a couple of things, but I'll start with absolutely ask your child questions. Be a curious explorer when it comes to your child, right? If they are stating needs, stating wants, stating desires, and they don't fit in to keeping like the peaceable interaction, inquire about that. And make sure you inquire in an isolated situation. Do not ask your child why they don't want to hug Uncle Tony while Uncle Tony is standing right there, right? Because your child is not going to be honest with you. So make sure, one, that you're questioning, two, that you're questioning in an isolated, safe space, and then three, because they are children at the end of the day and don't have as extensive of a vocabulary as us, also provide your child an option to rain check, right? So it's like, all right, you don't want to be here right now? That's cool. You can go up to your room. I'll check in on you in 15 minutes and maybe, you'll have the words then, and provide them that option to still leave the space like they desire and also get their thoughts together, because kids are way smarter than we think they are. It's really not about intelligence most times, and it's about what they mentally have access to vocabulary wise, right? I can't tell you I'm sad if I don't know all the different ways to talk about being sad. You feel me? So that's one thing. Two, to go back to the God thing real quick, I'm about to get like slightly biblical, right? Because that whole like being assaulted is in God's plan. If that is what your thought process is, you're not really as deep in the word as you portraying yourself to be, right? First and foremost, right at the beginning, we didn't get everything right. We have free choice. Free choice ultimately means that we have the ability to make decisions outside of what God desires for us, which means if I decide to harm somebody, I absolutely can do that. And it will happen and nothing will stop it because of free choice. But at the same time, I always tell people God doesn't do everything, but God uses everything, right? So what happened to you can get used. Like in the story that started this whole thing, there was a thing that happened and then it got used to propel her life purpose. But that doesn't make the thing good. Just because it got used to do something doesn't change the fact that it was horrible, doesn't change the fact that God didn't orchestrate it, and it doesn't change the fact that it was somebody utilizing their free choice in a toxic manner, right? So I think there's a delineation that a lot of people need to make between something being used by God and something being orchestrated by God. They're not the same thing. Three, going back to the empowering of the children, super, super important, absolutely necessary, and important to understand that empowering your child doesn't take away from the power you have, right? So it's like if you're giving your child an order or an instruction to do something that is actually absolutely necessary for them to do, they can still complain about that. They have that freedom as long as they're doing what you ask. If you like, yo, Joey, take out the trash, and Joey's like, oh man, I always got to go to trash. This is stupid. Let them have their moment, right? Because they have to understand that they have the ability and power to speak up and advocate for themselves, even when, the action in and of itself is still a necessity. But we always treat it like this either or, where it's like, if I let you talk, then that means I'm allowing you to control me and all these different things. But the hierarchy really is non-existent. All being a parent means is that I've been here longer than my child. It doesn't mean that I absolutely know everything and my child completely doesn't know anything. It doesn't mean that my child can't tap into things that I can't tap into. They're just completely different discussions. And you'll have a much more fulfilling household if you pour into the communal power of your family, as opposed to the isolated power that you have as an adult and like dictator of your household. Aside from that, work on yourself, because the more work you do on you, the better your relationships are with everybody else, right? A lot of times I think parents and even friends of people who have been victims don't understand boundaries because they got poor boundaries, right? I can't tell you or instruct you on how to set a boundary because I don't even know how to do it myself, right? I grew up hugging Uncle Tony, so you got to grow up hugging Uncle Tony. But it's like tap into the part of yourself that you actually really remember, which is that you didn't want to do this. So chances are if you didn't, your child don't either. So allow them that freedom, right? So I cap everything I'm saying off with work on yourself, because the more work you do on you, the easier it will become to navigate all these different dynamics and dichotomies and spaces that we're talking about.
And that's a mic drop, ladies and gentlemen, non-binary. Yes, it is. Thank you for that. And to reframe some things that you said, not saying that you said anything wrong. I just don't want no one to be like, okay, well, you know, he said, but no, that's not what he said. When he mentioned the child saying, I don't want to, you know, take out the trash or anything, you're not teaching the child isn't being disrespectful to you. Allow, like I said, allow that child that freedom to have that moment to vent. Allow that child that freedom to have that moment to tell you how they feel. They're navigating their emotions, and they're navigating everything, their construct. They're not being disrespectful. They're not talking back. They're just telling you what they don't feel, which is an emotion, like doing. Okay. Then when they finish, you, the adult, the caregiver or parent, have a conversation with them on why this has to happen, and then talk to them about that feeling and actually come to an agreement with them when it comes to their emotions and their feelings. Don't sit there and think that that child is being disrespectful, because they're not. They're absolutely not being disrespectful when they say, now if they, you know, just willingly just be completely disrespectful to you, that's another thing. But if they're not being disrespectful and they're just saying what they don't feel like doing, then that's great. Also, he mentioned questioning. When you say questioning, when this goes on, I'm not, and this is no attack to what he said, and just it's just the wording. The wording is always key. You don't want to question the child, because that implies interrogation, and interrogation makes the child look like a criminal. And we don't want that to happen, because then the child won't look at you as the safe adult. The key is to keep that child protected. So you ask open-ended questions. Like I said earlier, what's going on? And then, you know, like I said, it may be nothing. Oh, Karen just don't want to be my friend no more, or whatever, you know. Anthony, you know, he kicked my PlayStation. So, you know, I told him he can't come over no more. That's why I don't want, you know, whatever. It could be whatever, right? But the key is how you frame it. Don't interrogate the child, because the child's gonna look at you like, this is not gonna happen, because you're questioning me and I feel as though that you're mad at me. And I don't want that, because now I don't feel like I can talk to you, because you're questioning me like I've done something. And that's another big thing with this, because that's the second part. Jamal, what are your thoughts?
So this is gonna be very random. You know that clip from Real Housewives of Atlanta where they're like, who said that? Who said that? You know that clip? I feel like that's how that's what I think God is like when people always bring God up. Because I'm like, whose God is this? You know what I mean? That people attach God to a whole bunch of shit. But yeah. If God is not love, then God is not, you know, that's my God, right? So, but I'm not gonna sit on that. What I was thinking about when folks were talking was how it is important to model the same things that you are trying to teach your children, right? Because first and foremost, I learned, right, how to exist in this world through my parents, right? Through observation, right? Through my interactions with them, right? That's how I learned how to exist, right? So, and I think in particular, and we could talk about this, we talk about Black folks, we got a lot of stuff to kind of just unpack and deal with when we're talking about relations, because we're talking about generations of a behavior that is informed by things that are not love, right? You talk about the legacy of slavery, right? You talk about the legacy of white supremacy. You talk about the legacy of just behaviors that we had to develop out of that stuff. And just all this other stuff. We have a lot of behavior and interaction that is informed not from love, right? That is informed from survival, which may not be useful anymore. That is informed from trauma. And all that stuff comes into play when we're rearing, especially when we're rearing children. Especially when we're rearing children. And I think that it is important to get to a place where we and I think Enoch touched on this, where we are consciously working on ourselves, right? We are consciously learning and relearning how to be in community and how to be parents. Like it isn't a moral statement for a parent to take classes or guidance on how to be a parent. And I think that is an important thing to point out. Because there's no guide, there's no manual, right? You just, the child is here, you wing it. But it is, there's no moral statement. It's not a strike against your character to go out and seek help, right? I know a lot of parents who are in the act of very consciously seeking out ways to be a healthier parent, right? And to unlearn things, because not every way that we learn how to exist or that we learn how to be parents from our parents is the healthiest or the most correct way to go about things, right? Sometimes it was the way that it was the safest. Sometimes it was the way that it was most convenient. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I wanna put that out there, right? Because I'm not a parent. I don't have that experience, disclaimer, but I do know a lot of parents um who are in that practice. And I think that is good because, once again, that's how our kids learn how to exist in the world, right? I don't learn consent unless my parents teach me consent, right? If my parents don't teach me agency or consent or boundaries or any of those things, I don't learn them. I have to figure those things out through a lot of trial and error, right? Which is also creating more harm sometimes. Um, yeah, Yeah, that was kind of what I was listening to everyone talk, that and this the foolishness around what people attach God to, because I feel like God is just somewhere like, girl, yeah, yeah, I need to keep my name out your mouth because y'all got me attached to a whole bunch of foolishness. But yeah, that's my comment.
And it's funny because I do remember that clip. Oh, that's funny. Thank you for that as well. And yes, going back to what you said to um, holding yourself accountable, and also going back to fusing that with what Enoch said. Some of us, I'm gonna say, I think it's safe to say a majority of us grew up when families know where we didn't like how we were treated as children, or things that were said to us, or things that we were made to do as children. And we didn't like it then, but then when we grow up, we've rationalized that in a way of, well, I have kids now and I'm gonna make them do it. Why would it's like, why would you do that if you didn't like it to them? So you're repeating a cycle. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I don't know if you will agree with me, that cycle can backfire on you. That cycle can backfire. And which brings me to the new everything now, just to break the cycle, right? Normalizing, keeping your mouth shut, don't say nothing. You call this person sensitive, don't you trust me? This was God's plan for you, stop doing this. We did it because we love you. He only did this because you love you. What happens in his family, stay in his family, whatever. That intergenerational trauma is a real thing. Like I said, it is a real thing. But then you have that one family member or that one child, which is all it takes to disrupt the entire flow of that entire family. It's like taking a DNA apart. It does, when you take one part of DNA apart, it throws off the entire thing. And that's that one child or that one adult or whomever at that point in their life. People have black sheeps in their family. And then I also say people have polka dot sheeps in the family. That black sheep is actually trainable enough and to come around, but we know that sheep is actually controllable, but that sheep get on our nerves. But that one polka dot sheep is like, nope, I'm going to color all outside the lines. Look at me, I have polka dots. I don't want one solid color. This is what's going on. And then they want to go ahead and they want to ring the alarm, to reference Beyonce. They want to go ahead and ring the alarm and then go tell it on the mountain and let everybody know what happened. And then family is looking at them like, why would you do this to us? This is so embarrassing. Why are you embarrassing us? Why would you say that? Oh my God, this happened so long time ago. But guess what? It's still happening for them. And they're not doing it to be malicious to the family. They're doing it because for so long, they've held on to a secret that wasn't theirs to keep. They've held on to pain that wasn't theirs to keep. They have held on to something so painful that they don't that they got tired of it and they didn't want to do anything but tell. They wanted to let it go. And you still find a way to shame them for that. But then when they still continue to do so, then you become mad. And then sometimes you want to disown them. And it's just, or then you really don't respect their boundaries when they really not really try to get you to respect their boundaries, but really to tell you that we have this in place now. I'm not a child anymore, because now I'm speaking from the adult point of view. I'm not a child anymore. This is where I am. This is what's going to go on. This is what's going to take place. This happened. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like me, but we have to acknowledge what is going on right here. Ms. Kim, what are your thoughts?
First, I have to say to Jamal, am I saying your name right? What you don't know is I teach parenting classes. I facilitate parenting classes for Prince William County. And the first thing I tell people when they attend my class is, okay, you're having surgery tomorrow. Dr. A, he's going to wing it. Dr. B, he went into classes, got a refresher, just wanted to make sure he was fine-tuned on his skills. Which surgeon would you go to? I never had a class that anyone picked A. So they go B. I said, so what's the problem with parenting classes? Who on earth? I said, you can't work at McDonald's without training, but they'll give you a 9-month-old and say, see you. There's nothing wrong with getting parenting classes. There's nothing wrong with getting fine tuning. You would expect it from your surgeon, but you don't expect it from someone who's raising a whole human being. Think about that. So, enough of my rant on parenting. He just happened to touch on something that is really special to me, because I believe parents and the ones who go kind of feel like a stigma about, what am I doing? I tell people I go to parenting class, it goes, what's wrong with you? You should say, what's wrong with you? Haven't you gone? Anyway, so what happens, people are adult, how do you get out of the pattern? Because people are so used to telling their adult children, well, why aren't you past it? You should be over it. Why are you bringing up old news, blah, blah. Why did you tell, blah, blah, blah. They didn't tell. I can tell, and I use this in class. Think about something that someone called you when you were young. Can you think of the name? People start shaking their head. I don't ask what it is, right? Something you didn't like that someone said to you. Can you think of it? They shake their head. I said, so what makes you think that this person who was sexually abused has forgotten about what happened to them when you can think about a word that was said to you? A word, a sentence. Pain has no expiration date. It just does not. And for you to say, wow, that was 10 years ago, let it go. Wow, that was 10 years ago. There's no expiration date, and everybody expresses their pain the way they want. You have no right to tell someone how to express the pain that you caused. I'm gonna say it again. You have no right to tell someone how to express the pain that you caused. Well, I caused it, but I only want you to talk to me about it. I caused it, but I don't want you to yell. I caused it, but I don't want you to tell anybody. You caused the pain. You can't now tell them how the pain should affect them. That's their burden that they're trying to live with day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour. And if they went and told someone, that should be a lift for you. You say, wow, that's not a lift for me. What are you, insane? Now my whole family is going to be looked at. Maybe your whole family should be looked at. Maybe you should have been the one to deep dive into that. Maybe you should have been the one to step out before your child, uncle, cousin had to step out. If you want a change, everybody says they want to change, but no one wants to do anything to make the changes. I want my family to be different. This happened to me, like C. Thomas said, this happened to me as much. I hate it when my parent did it, but I'm doing it now because I have a, really? Is that the standard you have? So, I have a chemism, don't turn into what you despise. If you didn't like it, don't repeat it. Be the change. You say, okay, Cam, that's so nice of you to change, poet. Okay, how do I do that? What is a constructive way for me to do it? I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so step number one, if you didn't like it, deep dive into why you didn't like it. It may not be the big psychological, emotional thing. It may be just something you didn't like. If you didn't like it, that's enough. That's sufficient. Sometimes we have to think we have to ABC it down to the 10th power to deep dive into it. Some things you're just not going to like, and that's enough. You don't like it. Step one. If you don't like it, don't repeat it. We talked a lot about talking to your child, and you say, well, you know what, I'm gonna get fine. I'm gonna get all right. I'm good, because some know you're not really interested. Ooh, I'm gonna step on some toes. Some know you're really not interested. You just want to check the box that you spoke to them. So now, let's say you are that one who really is interested. How do you get across? You get across by not coming off as Mr. or Mrs. or non-binary perfect. Well, my childhood was nobody want. If you're trying to hear a problem, don't come out with Mr. or Mrs. or non-binary. Fantastic. Come out as a human being. Come out as, there's things that happened in my life I was a part of. The things I've done. I'm trying to make a change starting with me that will affect you. That's the change I want to start. How can I help you? There's nothing worse than people giving you solutions to a problem and they don't even know the problem well. Ask, how can I help you? What have I done that has either hurt you, offended you, or not helped you on your journey? Don't superimpose. Don't think you know. Find out. And then do the things that, hey, now you got to do some work. You have to make some changes in your life. Well, I really don't want to change. Well, then you don't want to do anything about the problem. You just want to talk. You just want to check the boxes and say, I went to my son, daughter, non-binary person, and I said such and such. See, I'm a great person. See, I'm great. It's not about how great you are. It's about the change you make. And no one may know about it but you and your child, and that's enough. If you're doing this to showboat, to get recognition, to put something on your resume, to put something on your CV, to put something on your EPK, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. This is about changing your whole family's pattern. It starts with you. It starts with you doing it for the right reasons, not so you can talk to your friend on the phone. And guess what? You may have to cut some people off because some people aren't going to be with the changed you or the change boundaries that you put in. Because once you start putting up boundaries, you're going to lose some dead weight. And you say, well, I really don't want to, these people have been in my life. Change that is uncomfortable is the change you need. If you've only changed when it's been comfortable, then you've missed some opportunities to make some great changes in your life. You're not a lost cause. You're not a problem. You're a person who needs to take the next step. I am not saying it's going to be easy. What I am saying, though, it's going to be worthwhile. And on the other side, you look back and say, I wish I'd done this sooner.
That's Mama Kim, everybody. And I thank you for saying that, because a lot of times, and I've had conversations, full disclosure, I am a survivor as well as an advocate. And I've had conversations with, parents who have taken classes like parenting classes and everything to have better conversations and, and to how to actually relate to their child, literally how to relate to their child. And they have told me that they went to family therapy and the therapists have failed them, but they've actually had more excitement and more connection with other parents in these parenting classes. And I'm not saying nothing bad about therapy because it is fun. I promise you it is, but sometimes you have to have an after party after that therapist. And one of the things that a lot of parents would tell me, like with some of the parents who was in these classes, a lot of those parents were seeking participation trophies. And it was like, it was an insult to the time that they was in there, because you don't get to have a trophy for being a parent. This is a child who is counting on you to protect them, to nurture them, to guide them, to love them. You don't get to get a trophy for that. And a lot of them I found do seek participation trophies. And a lot of adults, period, if you're not parents, they seek participation. No, you're an adult, you're a parent. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Do your job. Thank you for that, Ms. Kim. Enoch?
Yeah, I do not be surprised at the amount of parents, guardians, partners, best friends, whatever, that essentially carry that energy of like, I deserve a trophy for doing the things that I'm supposed to do. And I was actually having a conversation with one of my homies a couple months ago. And I'm gonna tie it together. We were talking about young men who like slouch their pants, right? Which I am a young man who slouches my pants, right? But he was talking about how, you know, because he works in the detention center, he was talking about, you know, how when he sees the young boys in the detention center doing it, you know, he gives them the same spiel that we were giving, like, oh, you know, people have to respect you, so you have to do these certain things and da 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 da. And one thing I was telling him was like, we are conditioned from a very young age to do things because of the validation of other people, right? We never talk to people, and no one talked to us really about doing things for the validation of ourselves, right? It's like, you have to carry yourself this way so these people acknowledge you. You have to do these things so this group looks at you. And then we get surprised when someone becomes a full, able-bodied adult and are still doing things for the acceptance of others, right? We get surprised when someone feels like they don't have a voice or feel like they aren't empowered to speak. And it's like, you've actually been conditioning this person since they came out the womb to do everything that everybody else wants them to do, right? Because that's what you were taught. And then that goes into another thing of like, if you find yourself doing something that was done to you, ask yourself why you're doing that. And if your answer is because that's the way it is, it's probably something you shouldn't be doing. If we being 100% honest, if that's as far as you go with it, like this is just how it's done. No, that's not good enough. And it doesn't always have to be deep, right? It literally can be, I'm doing this because this is a preference of mine, and that's fine if it's not harming anybody. But if it's like, yo, my child don't talk back to me because that is just how I was raised, that's not good enough. And that usually those actions are the actions that create the ripple effects of harm that are navigating and spreading throughout all our family units. Also with like understanding that the pain you didn't experience isn't yours to judge, right? Because I'll take it even farther than like the pain you cause isn't yours to judge, just the pain you didn't experience in general. And I think a lot of times there are these things that, and I'm specifically talking about Black people now, because if we being honest, those are the people I care about the most. So like, there are a lot of things we understand on a macro level, and then we don't scale them down to understand how these same things happen on a micro level, right? Because everything, or at least I'm a believer that everything on this planet is a fractal, right? It's all just repeating patterns that happen on small scales and larger scales. So we can understand how slavery can have this large ripple effect through our community and society, even though it was 400 some odd years ago, but then can't understand how this traumatic act has a ripple effect through a person, even though it was like 10 years ago, right? And so it's like, if there's a generational pain that happens to the community, that same thing occurs on the individual level, right? So this understanding that there ain't nothing new happening under the sun. And if you can map it large, you can map it small. And if you don't know how to do that, there's tons of videos to teach you, right? Because we often talk about how like there isn't enough education on like mental health and all these things, but it's enough. It's out there. We just not being intentional about looking at it, because going back to that outside approval and validation thing, we think that says something about us or what we can't do and skills that we don't have and so on and so forth, which I will cap all of this off by saying it is very important to fail out loud, right? That's not something we're taught. That's not something that is discussed. That's not something we're encouraged to do, but fail out loud, because we don't even really get to judge or gauge whether something is a failure or not, because we don't know how it's going to impact somebody else. Transparency is one of the biggest teaching tools and one of the biggest connectors between all people. You did it wrong. So what, bro? We all gonna figure it out together if we all know you did it wrong. It's not something you have to shoulder when it's a communal thing, right? And then that empowers other people to talk about the things they're struggling with, the things they don't feel like they're getting right, which you may have a toolkit for, right? So fell out loud. You can hashtag that, you feel me? And that is my spill.
Thank you so much. I like that quote. It's okay to fail out loud. I'm gonna quote you in a poem with that, because I'm gonna write a poem off of that. Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's some quotes in here tonight. Mama Kim giving quotes, Enoch giving quotes. But I swear that I can't say nothing after that. Like, it's okay to fail out loud. That said it all right there. You know, accountability, and it's okay to fail out loud. That's wow. Jamal, what you got?
Yeah, I think that the ego is an incredible thing. And I'm talking about there were a lot of comments about folks feeling as though there needs to be an acknowledgement for things that they are doing that are like steps to wellness. And I always think about this one guy saying, "You supposed to be doing that. You don't need no trophy for that." And I think about times when I have been in that position, right, where I've been like, dang, this is hard work. Somebody needs to acknowledge this. And someone comes behind us like, that was actually what you were supposed to be doing the entire time, right? But just that shift in behavior being a lot of work. Um, and I think that it is important to have like networks of wellness and support, right? Because absolutely, right? We don't. I'm not going to give you a trophy for not screaming at your children, but I do think that that should be acknowledged. If that is a change if that is a significant change, right, that has been needed to be made, and you are making the effort to do that, I think that that does need to be encouraged and acknowledged. Um, and I think that's why, networks like you were saying, Miss Kim, like classes that you teach, right, or having networks of support or wellness, that's why those things are absolutely important. Because the truth is, if it is not encouraged, then it is that much easier for me to slip back into old behavior, right? Because if you're not encouraging me for making one small step, right, towards wellness, then there's no, you know what I mean? There's no, I don't see any point or reason to continue, right? Especially if it's hard. Especially when we're talking about behavior modification, that mess is hard. You know, waking up in the morning and deciding to, okay, I'm gonna get a smoothie instead of going to get a sausage biscuit. That is hard, right? That is a small act that is hard as hell, right? And if you're talking about just like reactions to stuff and patterns of behavior, because the other truth is, like, and we've talked about it, abuse is not like an island. It's coming from somewhere. It is informed from something. It is a learned behavior, right? And making that turn, or that change in course, is a lot of work, even on small things, right? So I do think that, like, that is it is important that those things are affirmed, right, in some way, because I do this is a touchy thing, but I oftentimes think about how we can create a community, or a society that isn't punitive, and that we make space for everyone. And one of the hard parts, or one of the difficult parts, is we have a society where we have people who have committed acts of violence. What do we do with those people, right? And I'm not saying that you should welcome abusers into your house and stuff like that, but I do think there's a question of what do we do, um, with people who have caused harm, right? And what is a transformative process? What does that look like? Um, yeah, I also think, and this is a random tangent, but I also think that we are exist in a point in society where it is important for some people to document everything, and that that like ties into, that I need a trophy like mentality, right? I need to tell Instagram that I'm walking to the store. I need to tell Instagram that I'm getting this. I need to da, 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 da. So I think that that's something that we have to contend with, where the ego is just something that is so prioritized in our current moment. Um, when we're, engaging and healing with other people. Um, yeah, something that came up when I heard everyone else talking about like doing the work also is I think Enoch and Miss Kim, you were talking about the need to not like feel the need that you need to eviscerate or like go deep in on the first time. And I always think about this phrase that someone told me: what doesn't come out in the wash comes out in the rinse, right? If you're working, you know what I mean? If you're in the process of healing, what you don't get to now, um, sometimes means that you weren't meant to get to it now. Some things are too painful to get to on the first swipe, right? You got to build yourself up, right? So we got to deal with small things first before we get to those really like deep, those deep things, right? Um, and so it's okay, right? You don't need to feel like you need to just like completely rip your chest open and just like bleed on the street every single time. And that's an act of God. I think that compassion, right, of sparing you that's an act of God, right? That's an act of love that you can give yourself.
Smoothies over a biscuit. Okay.
Man, it's a struggle.
Thank you, Jamal. I liked how you said with the healing, if you don't have the capacity, and I'm paraphrasing now, if you don't have the capacity to deal with it at that time, or that one little thing, don't force yourself to do so. And I know a lot of people who have gone through, as I've done it, who have gone through a journey of healing, but they try to force themselves to look at something and try to nail it. And it caused them more damage and actually set them back. And that's okay, because that's also a learning experience. And also give yourself grace with that. Don't beat yourself up with that. Give yourself grace with it. But I always tell in my class, the Right to Wellness class that I teach, I tell everyone to, when you're on your journey and you're doing so good on your journey, there's one obstacle come up and you look at this obstacle dead in its what figure. And if you're not ready at that time to deal with it, don't. Look at it and acknowledge it. Name it if you have to, because when you name it, you're still letting it know that you have power and dominion, and tell it, I'll be back, but not right now. But I will be back and we will have a conversation. And I think it's very important to do those things because one, it speaks to you, number one, in your strength. Because I also think, I feel that healing is also redefining you as a person. It's redefining your strength and your tenacity and how far you're willing to go to be a better person for you before you're a better person for anyone else. Because healing is for you only. It's for you only. Everyone else get the benefit from it, but it's for you only. And I think that's very important to only talk to or deal with certain aspects when you have the capacity to do so. So I thank you for mentioning that, very much so. This is going to be our last question, and it's going to be framed in a way, and we're going to frame it and switch it around to Jamal, because I want him to be the one to start off answering this question first. So in my work that I do for training adults on how to respond to sexual abuse and how to react to it, my first time I've ever trained, did my very first training, I had this gentleman in there who said, I don't even know how it even came up in the training, but he made it a point to say to me that, well, I believe homosexuals are gay because they were molested as children and they didn't have a way of really navigating and doing what they're supposed to do. And it was the fault of the person, and it's really the child's fault. Literally, it's the child's fault that they grew up gay because they let that person manipulate their sexual orientation. In response, I said, professional as I could be, I said to him, I do want you to understand, sir, thank you for your opinion, but I do want you to understand that a child who is molested by someone in the same sex does not dictate their sexual orientation. It means that they were sexually assaulted. Studies show that heterosexuals who molest children of the same sex are in a well-committed heterosexual relationship. And it is less likely for a homosexual to cause harm to a child. But thank you for your opinion. What are your thoughts on that, Jamal?
Okay, so let me time myself and I'm about to read. So here's the thing, right? The first thing I think that we really have to, I think that it is a worthwhile conversation to clearly look at what is molestation and sexual assault, right? Because I think that a lot of times what people do not consider to be molestation and sexual assault are when we allow underage boys to deal with adult women. When we, you know what I mean? And so I think that the ways in which that gentleman and a lot of gentlemen like him look at what can be like trauma informed behaviors are really skewed by patriarchy, and I think that that needs to be addressed and looked at. Yeah. Also, it's really interesting to me how people have these opinions about the way that people develop sexually when they have not experienced those things themselves, right? Not all homosexuals come from a childhood of abuse, right? Not all people who come from a childhood of abuse become homosexual. Um, oh, I don't know. Just you threw me. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of like violence and lack belief, I think there, right? I think that we oftentimes interpret the world through the lens that we have been given, and sometimes that lens is skewed by a lot of just phobias, right? Sometimes that lens is skewed by a lot of painful experience. Sometimes that lens is skewed by a lot of just violence in general. And I think that the the quicker, right, or the more that I can get out of being out of this place of examining every single act or every single thing in the world by my own thoughts or experience, I think the more I can get to a place of truth. Um, yeah, yeah, and it's just wow, what a profoundly ignorant comment that a lot of people share sentiment in, right? Profoundly ignorant. But yeah, I think that it is important to realize that sexual assault in children does not define the child's sexuality. I think that we can look at a lot of behaviors or patterns that come out of people who have been like sexually assaulted, um, but they do not define like what a sexuality is, right? And there's no sexuality on the planet that is defined by trauma. That's all I have to say.
And I thank you for your answer. And I'm going to leave it at that, because if I go further, it will be a reading session and I have to be professional. Okay, Miss Kim, what are your thoughts?
I think we have to get in as not even a nation, a country, a world, a universe where the person who is traumatized speaks for themselves. Let's stop with people interpreting someone else's trauma. We don't need that. Blacks don't need someone to interpret for them. Native Americans don't need someone to interpret for them. Homosexual people don't need someone to translate for them. This is not needed. We are very well versed. I'm not saying every Black person, obviously not everybody's well versed on speaking on it or wants to speak on it, but there are plenty of us available that if the need comes up to speak on how we got our trauma or how we got to this place in our life, if we are not personally well versed, there's someone in our universe who can speak for us. So people, if it's not your trauma or it's not your issue, or if it's not your stereotype you're dealing with, please don't speak for someone when you have no possible connection to the pain, trauma, limitations, stereotypes, life, shoes they've walked in. You are not helping. You are not helping. You are not helping. Just like you wouldn't want me to speak for you or say anything about you or influence you in your life, don't speak for generations of people. Don't speak for races of people. Don't speak for cultures of people. Don't speak for anyone but yourself. Stop trying to put yourself and be the spokesperson for someone else and then speak I don't even know what to call that. speak something as a fact and then get other people buy-in on something that you have no knowledge of whatsoever. It's ridiculous. Speak for yourself. In my personal opinion, I didn't like it. It was ridiculous to me. But if you said, in my personal opinion, I'd be like, well, it's a not well-versed opinion. Obviously, he doesn't have the knowledge base to make that opinion, blah, 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 blah. But once you start stating something as a fact, here's where the problem lies. Because in this current thought process, people take a crumb, a grain of sand of inference and make it a fact. And we can't have that. You speak for yourself, sir. And sir, I'm using that term as loosely as I can. You speak for yourself and let other people speak for themselves. And then that way, there's no loss in translation. There's no, well, I meant to say, I know how Black people feel. No, you cannot possibly. You can't. I don't care if you're dating someone who's Black, your cousin's Black. You can't. There's a different walk for people associated with Black people and people who live in the skin. And I'm not saying that so that we are so, oh, there you go again. Black people are so super sensitive. We're not sensitive. What we're saying is let us talk about our own pain ourselves so it can be vocalized correctly, because you can't vocalize something you haven't walked through. I'm not going to talk to you about a cancer that's only in men and say, well, let me tell you how men feel. That would be ridiculous. I'm going to talk about something that I can put a voice to. I'm a parent. I can speak to the voice of a parent. I'm a Black woman. I can speak to the voice of a Black woman. And again, it's not universal statements because Black women are different. Parents are different. I'm talking generalizations in those fields. But it's really difficult to hear from someone who hasn't walked a mile in a shoe to tell me, well, let me tell you how parents are. Oh, you have kids? Are you know, you don't have to have birthed them. I'm not one of those people who, you didn't have it, so you don't know. Because some people are guardians, all that. I consider that equal. I'm not going to play that hierarchy game, play that with somebody else. I don't believe in parental hierarchy that people play. If you took over a mentorship or you decide to be a big brother, big sister, whether, guardian to someone else, some person, then you're a parent. If you haven't walked in those shoes for whatever reason you chose, it didn't come your way, life didn't, that's fine. But then don't come talk to me about parenting and say, well, as someone, I did a little research. Okay, now when you do some more, you come back. Let the people who have the pain speak for themselves. You get a clearer answer and you won't get ignorance in the place of wisdom.
Mic drop. Mic drop. I have nothing to add to that. All right, thank you, Miss Kim. Enoch, before you even say anything, Miss Kim and Enoch are true allies, but I'm telling you, I'm seeing in his eyebrows that he's about to go in.
There are so many things. In general, I think it is foolish to believe that trauma decides your sexual preference, right? That given the high rate at which women are sexually assaulted or harassed, right? If we are going with your trauma being a way to condition you to like specific genders, there would be way less queer women because men are out here causing exponential harm at statistically proven rates, right? But there are still queer women that exist. So are we just assuming that the queer women never had these experiences? Also, it doesn't line up, right? Also, I think a large part of the issue is that we view queer identity as a deviation, right? And so we put it in these boxes where if it exists, there has to be something that caused it because it's not the norm. And we don't take into consideration that queer folk have existed since the beginning of time, right? They have been around equally as long as regular hetero cis folk, right? Like this isn't like a new age like occurrence where queer people have just developed because it's on media and all these things. It's like, no, this has been a regular thing. And a lot of the things that we deem, specifically as men, a lot of the things we deem as like queer behavior was stuff that straight men were doing regularly, like wearing wigs and makeup and dresses, right? Like there's just like all this heavy manipulation of the sexual dynamic. And we all just buy, well, not we all, I don't want to say that, but a lot of us buy into it without questioning where is this narrative coming from and why does it need to exist? Where do I get off thinking that because you have a different preference than me, that means that you're a deviation and therefore there has to have been something harmful that caused this, right? This is the same type of rhetoric that like white people use to justify the harm of Black folk. And we understand that, right? It's like, oh, I'm not Black, I'm not a deviation. Black people been around forever. Well, it is the same for people who hold queer identities, right? Like it's nothing new. And I said this earlier, like it's really nothing new happening under the sun, bro. It really is not. And like this ideology is part of like what the issue is. And, you know, as was stated, it's not something that you really need to figure out for real. Like as the person who's not the person holding the identity, you don't need to understand all the intricacies of somebody's sexual preference or sexual identity to respect them and view their humanity, right? Like you actually don't even need to think about it for real. If I like men, then that is what it is, right? It really doesn't change anything about our interaction if you're not a harmful person. The only time you might need to watch what you say is if you saying stuff, I was about to cuss, if you saying stuff that don't need to be said in the first place, right? And this goes back to like, I think there are so many people who don't explore their own sexuality that they feel the desire to police other people's sexuality because it makes them more comfortable about what they don't know about themselves. And it's like, I'm not responsible for what you chose not to explore. That's on you. That's on you, homie. Don't make me a part of that conversation. Don't make me a part of anything that's going on. Just go figure out what you like. And you might be surprised because you might come back and find out that you like the same stuff I do. And then what do we do? Right. So that's people like that just really irk me. And like it's like this common stereotype and narrative that I feel like is just really pushed so often. And there is no empirical data to support it whatsoever. None. So that's my spiel.
Okay, now I'm going to say what I want to say because you said something that prompted my response. And I thank you for everything that you said. Those men, going back to what you were saying about, you know, having the opinions of gay men and queer women and high rate and all that greatness. So there are a lot of cishet men who will scream Black Lives Matter, will promote BLM like, you know, the discovery of a loaf of bread. And as soon as they see someone who is Black and queer present, it is a problem. It is an issue because we are looked at as the downfall of the Black community. That's also a problem for me. These same cishet Black men don't realize that the movement that they're supporting and that they're part of was created by Black queer women. So at this point, you're not looking for equality, you're looking for dominance. You're looking to be the sole person. You're looking for control. It's okay for you to have agency over a woman's body and then disregard her consent. But at the sight of a gay man saying, hey, that's the only time you understand what consent is. That's the only time you want to employ a boundary. That's the only time you feel a pinch of what that woman feels when you would not leave her the hell alone. That's the only time you ever understand any of that. The only time. I challenge every single one of them to shut the hell up because that's what they need to do. And not all of them can do it because they are thinking with the wrong head and they want to lead with the wrong head all the time. And that is a problem. Kudos to all the men, black, white, whomever. Kudos to every single one of those other men who do not think like that, who do not have that thought process. And thank you for even holding them accountable. But there is so much work that still needs to be done in that arena and surrounding that. And it is so painful watching and knowing that there are so many Black men who are still want to dog a Black woman and harm a Black queer or even their child if they have a shred of femininity, because it's an issue. You do not have the right to have that agency over that situation because it is not your prerogative. It has nothing to do with you. Whatever's going on with you, you need to get help for that. And as Jamal said earlier, if you're not ready to deal with that, you don't need to be in that relationship, because how dare you bring it to the doorstep of someone else and you expect them to deal with it because you don't want to. That's all I have. So that concludes the panel. And I do thank each one of our panelists for being here tonight. Ms. Kim, Jamal, Enoch, if you want to go ahead and tell everyone who's listening where they can find you and what you do and all that great branding grooviness, now's that chance.
Hello, good people. My name is Kim B. Miller, and I'm a spoken word poet, teaching artist, facilitator, motivational speaker, author, and I'm also the poet laureate for Prince William County, Virginia. I'm the first African-American poet laureate for PwC. And next week, January 13th, is my birthday, and I will be facilitating the Writing to Wellness class for women. 18 or over, come on, sign on up, because, you know, writing matters. And you don't have to be, a lot of people like, I'm not a writer, still come. I'm not a poet, still come. It's not about being a perfect writer or the perfect poet. You hear a couple of words, it's the New Yorker in me. I'm originally from Brooklyn. The perfect writer or the perfect poet. It's about you expressing yourself in the way you want to express it. And each one of us has classes that do that. So don't feel that need of perfection. That's the problem with artists. And I know, we know, because we that way too. But don't get stuck on perfection. Get stuck on help and taking the next step to wellness, as opposed to getting stuck on perfection. Because the three of us are willing to, the four of us are willing to help you on your path. And a special shout out to C. Thomas, because he is the creator of Writing to Wellness, and this is his baby. And to be brought in on something this phenomenal, this special, this unique, and that's what it is. It's a blessing. And if you haven't attended one, attend one, first of all. And then send C. Thomas the shout out, because again, to take something this special and to expand it so that it can touch different people in the ways it needs to be touched. He was already brilliant. Then he had to add more to it. You know, he's just show off. That's all I have to say.
You know, I try. Enoch.
What's good, everybody? I go by Enoch the Poet. I am, of course, a poet, author, trauma-informed educator, executive, publisher, and founder of Black Minds Publishing LLC, as well as a manga writer. I'm now officially adding that to my titles because I dropped my first chapter on December 31st. You can follow all my social media is either at Enoch the Poet or at Black Minds Publishing or at Immortal Dark Manga. Black Minds, I definitely would encourage you to follow before you follow me, for real, because we are working very hard to continue helping Black creatives make sustainable careers for themselves. We publish Black creatives, we help them with branding, we help them with business plans, so on and so forth. We have a monthly magazine that we post on IG that showcases visual art and poetry from different Black creatives all around the nation. We've even got some outside of the country. So yeah, check us out again at Enoch the Poet, Enoch like the boy from the Bible, at Black Minds Publishing, or at Immortal Dark Manga.
Thank you so much. Jamal?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, thank you, C. Thomas and Creative Sula, and thank you, Enoch and Kim. This has been a good discussion. I'm Jamal Rashad. I'm a poet and editor. And I'm definitely interested in helping people edit their work or like co-sharing work, if you want to swap stuff like that. All of my social medias are the same thing. It is Art in the Court of the Black Bag, Art in the Court of the Black Bag, Instagram and Twitter. Holla at me.
And last but not least, little old me. My name is C. Alexandria Bernard Thomas. I am the poetry coordinator for Creative Suitland. I am going to go ahead and plug their information first because I must. You can follow us at Creative Suitland, literally at Creative Suitland on everything. We do follow back, and all three of my facilitators are followable. They're notable. They're awesome. And as you heard, very much so savage. So follow them, make sure you support them. And as for myself, you can follow me on my personal Instagram at cthomasworks. I do follow back because I do think it's rude that you do not follow back when someone follows you, unless they're trying to stalk you, whole different story. But if you like tonight's chat and you found it to be valuable, I do encourage you to spread the word of all of the Writing to Wellnesses, because we have created a family within these programs. And I will say Writing to Wellness is Creative Suitland's longest running virtual program. We are literally coming up on 2 years for Writing to Wellness to be in circulation. And it has been a very rewarding thing. And I never in a million years thought this program would come this far and to do what it's doing. And it's doing great things also outside of Creative Suitland. And that's a whole horse of another color, another conversation, but it's doing great things. I'm proud of this workshop. This workshop, like I said, it was birthed from childhood trauma. It was birthed from the pain. It was birthed from a lot of things. And I decided, instead of being depressed, create. And Writing to Wellness came to be. And it's built off of a personal quote of mine: your pain may know you, but it has no power over you. And I live true to that to this day. And it's a very powerful thing. If you also want resources on who to contact if you suspect child abuse, or resources on who to contact within your state or your city, you can also, when you follow me, I will make sure that you get that information as well. Again, my IG is cthomasworks. My website is imcthomas.net. I do thank you all for being here tonight. Again, I want just give yourselves a round of applause. Ms. Kim, Jamal, and Enoch, thank you so much for being here. You guys are amazing. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you to Creative Suitland for giving this workshop a home and a chance. Who knows, we might have another discussion. We don't know, but something great will happen. I can tell you that. This is not the end. It will not be the end. Thank you so very much.